The METUS Tech Show.
Welcome to the METUS Tech Show, a show for HVAC professionals by HVAC professionals.
The METUS Tech Show.
So we're in Swanee this week again, and this is our annual training team meeting. Roland.
Yes,
Roland's back.
I am back.
Yay! It's about time.
Yeah, so we this is a pretty exciting week for me anyway. I enjoy this week. We need to do this more than just once a year. We need to do this like 3 times a year.
Yes, we do.
That's the plan for 2024. But what we do is we get together and the training team gets together and we exchange ideas. We talk about our training centers, what we've done throughout the year to our training centers, upgrades, right? We talk about how we can just do things better in the training department, right? One thing that we do very well as a training department is we eat. So here we go again. We're talking about food again.
Yep.
Yum, yum.
Yep.
Yeah, we're going to be out this week and trying out some different restaurants here in Georgia as
That
a team.
ramen soup for lunch, it was awesome.
Yes. Last year, we tried something new. So we grilled at the hotel on the grills. That was pretty cool,
It was a success.
right? We went over to Kroger's or supermarket, and we each grabbed a steak or whatever it was. Robert was in charge of the desserts. I remember that. He bought like 2
he's
giant
good for that.
cakes. So that's his forte, right? Desserts. He loves his desserts, cakes, all of that stuff. So he was in charge of that. I think I got some steaks and some sausages. There was some like Texas Twinkies or something like that we grilled on the grill.
Texas Twinkies.
Texas Twinkies.
I don't remember that.
Really?
You don't remember the Texas Twinkies?
Well,
So it's like
when we're thinking of Twinkies, I'm thinking of an actual Twinkie.
it's not in sweet. It's a jalapeno pepper with sausage or brisket inside.
Oh,
yeah, that's right. I do remember
wrapped.
that.
Yeah, that was
Bacon.
good. That
You
was
can't
good.
wrap
That was
anything in bacon. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You wrap a Twinkie in bacon. Come on.
good. You're right.
Right?
Chocolate.
So,
I've had bacon wrapped Snickers.
chocolate covered bacon.
Bacon.
Yeah, we talked about that last week.
And it's much better if you put
Comes
blue
with
cheese on
defibrillator.
top.
Yeah, and we had Felix laughing for like a half hour.
At least.
You said, does that chocolate covered piece of bacon come with a defibrillator?
Did you
I mean,
hear
he
my
was
additional?
done.
That
He was
the
done.
funniest thing.
My
So,
additional recipe.
He was done. He almost reminded
Needs.
me of you, Juan. He was out of control.
Was he?
Yeah.
But-
everybody in the restaurant was looking in our direction.
But a Texas Twinkie should have blue cheese on top.
No.
Here we go with the blue cheese
Oh,
again.
God.
That was episode
That's gross.
3 or something like that. We
no,
guys
yeah.
had the blue cheese debate.
Oh,
Well, anyway, welcome to the METUS Tech Show, everybody.
Nice to be
We got some new voices here, a new voice. We have Gary Ozer from Florence, New Jersey, a training center, right?
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Now you live in Pennsylvania.
I live in Philadelphia, city of
Okay.
city of Philadelphia.
The New Jersey Training Center is right on the border. You can throw a rock across the parking lot.
Yeah, the New Jersey Training Center. Other people call it Florence, New Jersey Training Center. It basically sits right across the Delaware River, across from Bristol, PA. So those who have traveled across the turnpike from New Jersey into Pennsylvania, it sits right there on the riverbank, connecting the New Jersey Turnpike to the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
Was that the river bank or the rubber bank?
It's just a riverbank.
wasn't there
It
something
sounded
famous in
like he
Florence?
said
Didn't they
rubber.
make something famous in Florence?
Well, Florence, there's a Roebling Museum, and if you know who Roebling is, he was the inventor of the suspension bridges,
That's it.
like an aircraft cable. Yeah. So he has a museum there where they have parts of the old factory, and they made suspension cable for the Brooklyn Bridge and also for the Golden Gate Bridge, among others.
Interesting.
It was very interesting, yeah.
Thanks, Gary. So when
come
we
to the
say New Jersey Training Center, it's not just the new training center. It's our new.
It's a 400,000 square foot distribution center, and we have our training center tucked away. The training center is about Well, it is 3,700 square feet,
Nice.
and it's a full-fledged operational. It's a big upgrade from the training center in Philadelphia that was 750 square feet.
Oh yeah, big
So,
time. Yeah, that was
It's much better than the closet.
yeah. And I think that the one in Philadelphia, when you taught a class, it was to 6 or 8 people, maybe.
It was 8 people max.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
8 people max.
Now you got plenty of room to run around.
cozy, but
Plenty of room for activities.
That's right.
They say. Awesome.
no. So glad to be
Roland,
here.
welcome back, Roland.
Yes,
It's been a while.
from Florida.
Yeah, our METUS Tech Show fans have been asking for you.
Yeah,
I think they have.
they have.
They have.
Yes.
And
At least they have in my classes.
I play at lunchtime. I play all
I do
METUS Tech
too.
shows.
and to the right of me, Juan Cardona
Hola.
Yeah.
One and only.
out of Ohio, and Juan is back. So we got the Roland and Juan show with us, which is a good thing.
Roll one.
Myself, Steve Pimentel, technical trainer out of the Boston Training Center. So today we're going to talk about maintenance tool as it pertains to commercial equipment, VRF equipment. Now, we do a lot of residential podcasts, and we haven't gone too deep into commercial stuff, but we are today. And with future episodes, we've been getting a lot of fan mail and people asking for more commercial information on systems. So Juan, when I teach class, and I teach regular 3-day city multi, or I'm teaching advanced city multi, I talk about looking at maintenance tool and knowing your vitals.
Yes.
So I tell the students, you go to the hospital, you go to the walk-in, you go see a doctor, they take vitals, they take blood pressure, they check your temperature, they check everything.
Pressure
right?
is the first thing they take.
Yeah. So it's almost the same thing. When
Yes.
we're looking at service, we're diagnosing a commercial system, whether it's an R2 simultaneous heating and cooling, a Y series heat pump, or a PUMI or smart multi system. There are targets that we're looking at on maintenance tool. Now, maintenance tool is a service tool. If you don't know what maintenance tool is, it's a service tool that utilizes a maintenance tool converter, which we plug into our computer and plug into anywhere there's MNet.
And
Now-
the software is a free download from MyLink Drive.
Right. So that's important. The software is free. Get a hold of your local distributor. If you don't have a maintenance tool converter, get yourself one. We also have a maintenance tool for residential. Well, that'll be another episode at another time. So when we look at maintenance tool, it's giving us a bunch of abbreviations, right? A bunch of acronyms, abbreviations. We don't know what they are until we roll our mouse over them, and actually it gives a little description on what it is.
Yeah, a little drop down.
Yeah. So my top 5 readings that I look at on maintenance tool may differ from Roland's. They may differ from Gary's. And Gary, you've done a lot of startups out in the field.
Yes, I have.
As a previous DSG before coming to work for us. So you have that you've been there in the front lines and starting these systems up. And I'm just going to go over my top 5, and you guys, disagree with me if you want to. But when I'm looking at maintenance tool, I'm looking at high pressure, which is 63 HS1, low pressure, 63 LS, TH4, which is our discharge temperature or compressor temperature, and our TC, which is our high temperature saturation, and our TE, which is our low temperature saturation. Basically, TC and TE is your PT chart for your pressures. Right? And those 5, I can tell a lot about the health of a system. You guys agree with that?
Yes. Yeah, and I'll just add, if I'm R2 system, I'm looking at that first temperature reading at the branch box as well. So that's
yeah.
So I might have 6. One probably has more.
Yeah, absolutely. You could have, your top 10, right? But
So I'm looking at PT1, PT2 as well.
okay, yep.
Let's talk about from the beginning. When do we look at these temperatures? These are target values that are to be used in test mode.
Good point.
So when you turn your system on, you let your system run, you need to get it out of the initial mode when a first startup. After that point there, once you reach the ordinary mode, and all the equipment needs to be on. They all need to be on either in heating or in cooling. But the key point is that you have to be in the ordinary mode. and run this run maintenance tool for at least 1 hour, because you're not going to be able to get good numbers off the first 15, 20 minutes.
Good point.
But after you start seeing 45 minutes come by, the system's going to settle down, and then these target values, the top 5 to 7, are going to take effect.
Yeah, and let's start to make sense, right?
Yeah. Otherwise, it's all over the board.
And Gary, just for the sake of explaining what each mode means, what's the biggest difference between initial and ordinary?
Initial is your startup mode. That when you first start up, it's going to go initial mode.
And
It's
what is
cold.
the system doing during that
It's
cycle?
checking. It's always checking. You're going to hear solenoid valves open and close. You're going to hear if you have a twin system, the OC might come on first, then it's going to stop, then the OS is going to come on for a period of time, then they both might come on for a while, and then it's going to stop. The whole system is going to stop at that point there, and then all of a sudden it's going to come back to life. The systems are going to come back on again, and usually within that 10-minute mark, that's when it goes into ordinary mode, where the equipment is operating ordinarily.
So it's really checking pressures and temperatures throughout the system, make sure there's no restrictions or stuck valves or anything like that.
Yeah, and the big one is discharge superheat.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of keys that found in the field when they first start systems up that you need to turn them on at least 12, and I always recommend 24 hours before your startup. You want to get that compressor nice and warm, and they don't use a belly band. Everything's a trickle charge into our compressors, but
And what's the purpose for that?
it's to keep the compressor warm.
Yep, drive that refrigerant out of that oil.
Yeah, bubble it off. So the second point after that is it's once it comes on, it also, during that period of time, it warms up your boards. All your boards on the outdoor units, it gets all those components nice and warm. So when you start the system up again, next day, it should operate normally. But if you try to start up and force it when it's cold out and it's a cold compressor and all your boards are cold, you're going to have some issues. And it might stay in initial mode. I used to give it like 45 minutes. After 45 minutes, if it's not jumping into ordinary mode, I'm shutting it down. I'm going to the next system.
Yep.
All right,
So
and
just let it rest for the next day even.
a lot of I get that question in class all the time. What dictates the amount of time initial mode is it's in initial mode? And there's been so many answers. It really, some people say, well, it's the size of the system. The smaller system comes. It's all about hitting the targets.
No rhyme and reason. There's no rhyme and reason. And, sometimes it could be initial mode for 5 minutes, some 10 minutes, 20 minutes. But after it's around 40 minutes and it's still not going, the system's running. But that's when you want to turn it off, give it a rest, and move on and come back to it later.
And when you say turn it off, are you turning the system off through a controller or through a maintenance tool versus pulling that on the disconnect?
Yeah, not really off the disconnect. You want to keep your power up.
And that's the point I'm
Power
trying to drive
up,
through.
but turn
point.
the system off. Like go to your, if you're turning it on and off by a maintenance tool, do it that way. Otherwise, go to your centralized controller, turn on the system, and move on to the next.
Yep.
So once the system starts operating in ordinary mode, you mentioned 45 minutes to an hour.
At least we say 1 hour for warranty, but even if it's you're having problems out there, and during the initial startup, I usually say that's getting the bugs out. So when you first start the system up, you need to make sure that you have all your indoor units are all there. You don't have any kind of indoor units that are in error or fault. Those all have to be taken care of before you move into the warranty stage.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So sometimes they take a while to start up. You can have 5 heads that take you all day. Otherwise, you have 12, it might take you, 3 hours.
Right.
So there's no rhyme or reason.
And, following the instructions that we have in our manuals or documents, before you do the startup, you should always confirm port connections and port assignments before you go any further.
Oh, yeah. When you have an R2 simultaneous system, you need to verify your ports. Ports, some people call them branches, whatever it is. You need to find out, make sure that the refrigerant is going to the room that it's supposed to go in. Now, it could be easy as your port assignment just being off one, or you could have lines that are crisscrossed.
Yeah. So if we have
happens.
lines that are crisscrossed on the ports, we don't necessarily have to flip those lines back around. We just have to port it correctly.
Yeah,
Right.
and make sure that your equipment, the right tonnage is inside that room. That's when you have a problem. If you have
And all that should be done before the commissioning is done. Those are two separate things.
Startup is getting the bugs out. You know, 'cause a lot of times you're doing startup. The floors aren't in, suspended ceiling's not in, the windows aren't in. You have a draft in the building.
Doors opening, closing, a lot of stuff.
That's startup, getting the system up and going. And always recommend is when you're starting the system up, make sure you don't have the guy there standing in the wall with the sheetrock. Because what happens when you get sheetrock dust on a coil?
Oh, yeah.
What do you have?
Yeah, and back to confirming the port assignments. When you're checking them, I've always, in my classes, I've always recommended to do one unit at a time. And to look at TH2 if it's running on TH2 at the indoor unit, if it's running on cooling, TH3 at the indoor unit if it's running on heating. Because if you're turning address 1 on, but address 4 is the one that's getting either cold refrigerant or hot refrigerant, that's your problem.
Yeah, or the power's not on or something else. There's another underlying condition that's causing that. Yeah. Now, you can use a maintenance tool as a tool to verify your port assignments by driving your LEVs open or closed. Or you can do it as simple as having somebody go in the room and turn it on and off.
Yep. One at a time. You can do that too.
Yeah, turn it on. It's just
Touchy-feely, feel your lines going in and out of the unit.
Yes.
Right? That'll tell you a lot.
Yep.
Well, good. So far, so good. So we've started the system. Now, back to Steve's top 5. Where do we start looking for our vitals?
We start like minute-wise, 45 minutes to an hour. Then you're going to start looking at your screen. And what's nice about maintenance tools, you could toggle back and forth from the beginning to the end. You want to keep that online. So then you're going to start looking at your numbers, whatever your top numbers are. I always start out with 63 LS. When in cooling, that should be around 102 as far as a benchmark and your target value. Then you start moving into your TH4. See where TH4 is. And that's typically your 160 to 200 range.
Yeah.
After that, you're going to start looking at your TC and TE. TC is at 100 degrees, and your TE will be 32 degrees. So that's your top. If we're looking into further targets, when you start going into your branch controller, then you start looking at your differential pressure across your PS1, PS3, and that's typically 0 to 10 PSI. And once that's confirmed, then you start moving into your indoor units, and then you'll be looking at, in cooling, TH2 to see if that's falling within the range 32 to 50.
Yep.
If that all works out, you're golden. You're good.
All right. And I get this question all the time from students in classes. Can I just plug maintenance tool in and just start taking readings and looking at targets? Yeah. Well, you got to be really careful here. If it's an ordinary mode, how many units are running? Are half the units running and half the units not running? Right? There's a lot of things to take into account. That's why we ask you to put it into test run. Pick a mode that makes sense for that time of year. Put it into test run. Like Gary said, let it run for 45 minutes, an hour. Then start taking your or looking at your targets, your top 5 readings or your top 10, whatever they may be. But doing this with, you don't know how many units are running. If, half of them are in heat, half of them are in cool. You could see a lot of different readings at this point. You're not going to see those targets that we're talking about. You agree with that, Gary?
Oh yes. And once your system looks good, then you can start shutting down and turning it off and moving on to your next system.
One thing that I've always share is like the discharge line of the compressor. That area right there at the top of the compressor, it's the hottest part of the system.
Yes.
So it's the one that's going to get the most of the attention. So one number that we as tech support individuals or instructors look at is discharge superheat. Now, the way you would calculate that is you take TH4, which is your discharge line temperature, and you subtract TC from that number, giving you your discharge superheat. Now, in our advanced city multi-class, we give you a range, and that range is 20 to 90 degrees. which if you speak to tech support, they tell you if it's 20 is bad, if it's 90 is bad. So ideally, it should be between 40 and 70 degree discharge superheat, which is really telling you if the system is properly charged.
And TH4 is so important. I can't express how important that temperature is. It's the health of your compressor. So if we have a very high TH4 temperature, let's say it's above 200, hasn't quite hit the 220, 230 mark yet, but it's up there. You know, what could I be looking at there? What is my problem with a very high discharge temperature?
Yeah, you could be looking at overcharge, possibly non-condensables. There's
undercharge.
Undercharge.
Yeah, with the higher the temperature, the higher the TH4 or the higher the discharge is, the lower, it's a low charge.
Yeah. It's simulating a low charge.
Right.
Doesn't mean it is, right?
Right.
We could have closed ball valves, restrictions.
You've got a bad thermistor.
Restricted strainers.
Yeah.
There's a lot to look at, but it's a great starting point.
Yes.
Very low TH4. Overcharge, like you said, Roland. I'm flooding back, right? Before I go messing with my charge, maybe I should check my filters, check my coils, make sure my coils are all clean. Dirty coils and filters will cause flooding and a low TH4 temperature.
And just to jump on that too, a lot of times when somebody's doing this, especially in the class, they're relatively new to it.
Yep.
So I like to bounce back and forth between the piping diagram on maintenance tool and the individual numbers.
Trend view. All right, so there's different views on maintenance tool.
And they get a good idea. They start to see where those thermistors are in relationship to the piping diagram.
Yeah. So when I started here 6 years ago, maintenance tool hadn't quite evolved yet into the pictorial diagram of the refrigeration circuit that we see, where we actually have the choice of clicking on today.
Right.
It was just the trend view, right? And then if you go back as far as Gary, you're talking the classic view.
It's still there. If you open it up, you still can see classic.
Yeah, you can choose between classic and trend view. And basically, that's just looking at numbers. And if, like Roland said, by clicking back and forth and going to that refrigeration flow view, now the students can see, hey, there's a TH3. That's where it's located on this system.
Right.
Don't think it's the same on every system. It may be TH3, maybe in a different location, piping wise, but it's basically TH3 is our liquid line temperature. Now, Juan, we talked about this a little bit earlier, and you mentioned two other vitals that you throw in there, and that's TH3 and TH5. Can you talk about those?
Well, no, that's TH2 and TH3 on the indoor units.
Oh, on the indoor units.
But I also look at PS1 at the branch controller.
Okay.
Because one thing that we teach in our classes is the pressure differential between 63HS1 at the outdoor unit, which is discharge line pressure, and PS1, which is your liquid line pressure at the branch controller, should not be more than 40 pounds differential.
And that, I believe that's the first place in the branch box is looking at pressure. But see, here's another thing to take a look at too. Let's just say, for instance, it's a 250 feet of pipe length.
Yep.
All right. I'm expecting to see probably a 30 pressure PSI drop.
Yeah.
But what happens if I have a 20-foot pipe length with a 30 PSI drop? That's where you have to start reading into it. Do I have a problem with a shorter pipe length? Could I have a problem? It's within the scope of what we're looking for, the targets. Right. But you have to take a lot of that into consideration. As
you
well.
You do. And then, like Steve said, the other two that I look at is TH2 at the indoor unit in cooling, and Gary gave us the range is 32 to 50. And then on heating, TH3, which is 125 degrees or higher.
Minimum, right.
So I misunderstood you. Juan, I thought you were talking about TH3 and TH5 at the outdoor unit, which is still a very important readings to be looking at.
TH5, whereas TH4 is the hottest point, TH5 is the coolest point.
Correct.
It's return back to your
accumulator.
It should be. You don't want it too cold.
Right.
Yeah, so with our N generation units, we incorporated TH15.
Yes.
Now,
yes, previous generations did not have that TH15 at the shell of the compressor.
Yeah, so that's going to tell us if we're again flooding back.
It's at the bottom. It's at the bottom of the compressor, sensing pretty much I don't want to say crankcase temperature because it's not
Shell.
internal. It's shell temperature. And if that temperature drops below a certain target, it's gonna stop the system.
So at 32 degrees, I believe, is when we'll get a lockout scenario. Some other thermistors that are pretty interesting that we've added to our larger chassis VRF systems is TH 16, 17, and 18. And correct me if I'm wrong on those. I think 16, 17, and 18, which will aid in looking at the level of liquid in the accumulator.
Correct.
Yes.
Right. So great little feature that's been added in, as well as which was available on our water source before, it still is. We cool the inverter circuit down with refrigerant. We're doing that on the N generation now.
Yes.
With LEV 9.
Right.
So we're sending refrigerant to the inverter circuit to cool that down. That information is available on.
Yeah. So when you walk up to a piece of equipment and nothing is running, you hear that fan, and that's part of that inverter circuit to cool off.
Yes.
that,
So we also have
it does
computer
get too
fans in
warm,
there.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's all of those temperatures are on maintenance tool. So there's a lot to look at on maintenance tool. We're just giving you a little small chunk to start with, right? And
I mean, and you talk about your top 5, and I mentioned the top 7. By all means, that's not all the numbers we should look at. Those are just happen to be the first ones that I will look at.
right.
Yeah, give somebody a starting point to look at because it does pull it together. Because typically, I'm going to, from the point of teaching a class, first thing is it's always kind of funny. I say, let's look up maintenance tool, and everyone goes right to the condenser. And I was like, spread out, cheap people. We can go plenty of different places to hook this up. And the other thing too is that without an idea of what the targets are, you're just looking at a bunch of numbers, and they may make sense to you. If it's you've been on it a few times, but once you start telling them, once they start getting the idea of what the targets are, it really starts pulling it together. As far as instead of just looking all over the place all the time, you're actually looking at something specific.
And something over the years that I found with our VRF systems is that they can fool you.
Trickery.
Yes. Our outdoor units are going to sit there and they're going to put out a certain state of refrigerant for that mode that they're in, right? Especially with an R2 system. That outdoor unit is just going to put out whatever state of refrigerant for that mode that it's calling for. 100% cooling, maybe it's mixed, right? But we could have ball valves closed and still see good targets on our outdoor unit. That's what blows my mind.
Yes.
You can't think of it as a traditional HVAC system, even though the fundamentals are there. But it's very different as far as the condensing unit is going to do what it needs to do to send that state of refrigerant.
Yep.
And it's always going to try and maintain targets. So you could, like I said, have restrictions, close ball valves, and it really throw you for a loop. Now, in the past, when a contractor wants to send in maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour of maintenance tool runtime to one of our tech support people here, maybe it's to an area service manager, right? And take a look at this file. What can you tell me? It's something wrong with the system. I can't figure it out. Things have changed over the years. Now we have something called Team Viewer. So tech support, they can ask you for your to log into your computer, and they can look at maintenance tool along with you. So that's something that's kind of changed how we used to do things.
Awesome.
We would email a maintenance tool file in. Team Viewer has changed everything, right? So Juan, can you explain that process?
Sure. And that's a document in MyLink Drive, and it's found on the outdoor R2 or Y series equipment, and it's a data submission process. That is where you have the power onto the system, and you connect maintenance tool to it for 30 minutes without the system running. Well, guess what they're looking at? They're looking at pressures, equalized pressures.
It's a good point.
Because if the pressures are not equalized, there's only one valve responsible for it. So if I don't have equalized pressures, that would be SV1C, which is the one that's stuck. So they're looking at equalized pressures. Look at the thermistors. We have TH7, which is the ambient thermistor on the outdoor unit. All the other thermistors, if the system is not running, should all be equal to temperature.
Yeah, they should all be within range of each other.
Yeah, same thing in the branch controller, same thing in the indoor units. TH2 in the indoor unit. TH1, which is your room sensor or your return air sensor, all the other thermistors should be of equal temperature. So that's a quick way of confirming that thermistors are checked, and you're doing it within 30 minutes. So after that, you start the system on either heating or cooling, depending on the outdoor temperature. You set the whole system on test run for 15 minutes with everything running for 15 minutes. And then from there, you start turning off one indoor unit at a time every 5 minutes. And then you go until there's only one indoor unit running for 5 minutes. And then you save that file, and that's what you send into tech support.
Yeah, that's great. And I love the point that you made, how much you can how much diagnosing you can do with the system off.
With the system off,
right?
Absolutely.
If I have a suspicion of a bad thermistor somewhere in the branch box or the outdoor unit or an indoor unit, I can shut everything off and start looking at all my thermistors across maintenance tool and say, all right, I got, it's 77 degrees out and I got 77 at TH7. I have 77 across all my thermistors in the outdoor. Oh, wait a minute. There's one that's registering 140 degrees.
Right. TH3.
Right, better look at that one, right?
Yeah. Isolate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the process. One more thing that I can't let this go without being said is on targets. When we look at targets, we need to be aware that targets will float. For example, TH4, our range is 160 to 200. Well, what if it's 158? What if it's 202?
Right.
If you don't know that those numbers will float, are you going to really make an adjustment to get it done within the range? It's not worth it. So you just be aware of that.
Yeah,
you don't want to have.
You got to be patient.
Right. Plus, you don't want to have a wide range. You want to be as close to it as possible.
Right.
That's why we call it a variable system.
Yes.
It's always moving.
Yep.
Yeah, I always tell my students, if you are in a hurry, do not touch it. Don't touch it. All right. Anything else on the targets?
So as far as targets, that about does it on that end. And just if you want to know where to get a maintenance tool converter, basically just get a hold of your local distributor and either order one. Sometimes they have them in stock. All right. You may even have an older style maintenance tool converter kicking around your shop,
Which is fine.
and it looks different than the new ones. So the older maintenance tool converters are a gray metal box, and they're kind of rough looking. You can use it. It doesn't show you any less than the new one does. They both show you exactly the same for now. Anyway, I don't know if that'll change in the future. So if you have one kicking around your shop, you can use that. The newer style maintenance tool converters are in a plastic box. They're in a red rubber boot or cover, and it comes with an SD card, so you can record maintenance tool data to that SD card, bring that maintenance tool converter to a job site, leave it on a job site. Maybe you're trying to pin down a certain problem with a system. You can leave that on there for up to a year if you have a big enough SD card.
Right.
Yeah, back in the old days, you had to leave a laptop.
Yeah.
Yep.
And as far as the software, you can find that at mylinkdrive.com under the software tab. That's free software. And definitely check out our training. We have 3-day city multi-classes, and for our advanced service technicians, the advanced city multi-class. And you can register for those classes at MitsubishiComfort.com and just click on For Pros and click on training and check out dates at one of our 11 training centers across the country. And that's about it.
Awesome.
All right. This was right on
Thank you,
time.
Gary, for
Good
being
show.
present on the show.
Yeah, it's nice coming out here. Yeah.
And Roland, as always, it's
Always.
always to be in your presence.
Yes. All right. We'll see you. See you on the next one.
Adios.